Hey everybody, it's Mr. Purcell. Welcome to our first video lesson on cinematography. This is lesson 3. What is cinematography? Here are the vocabulary terms for this lesson. I recommend that you guys write these down in your notebook and give yourself several lines of space for each of these terms. That way you're ready to kind of write down what the definitions are and all the other important information for each of these terms as we go through them. Okay, what is cinematography? What does this word actually mean? What does it refer to? Well, as if you kind of look at the word, you can see that it blends cinema with photography. And essentially, it's kind of like photography, the photography of movies. So cinematography really is about the camera and how the camera captures the visuals that we end up seeing in the movies that we watch on the screen. In fact, as we get into these terms later on, you're gonna hear probably some terms that you learned when you studied photography. If you studied photography as a class or even within an art class, some of these terms might sound familiar. So a cinematographer is essentially the photographer of the film. This is a kind of a basic dictionary definition of cinematography: the art and craft of making movies by capturing a story visually. And in a way, it's kind of a perfect definition. In a way, it's a really weak definition. The essence of this is this: capturing a story visually. Movies, as we talked about the week before spring break, movies are kind of a unique art form. A lot of other, or I should say, some other art forms tell stories, like literature, novels tell stories. Drama, the theater can tell stories. But cinematography, or I should say, movies are really the only ones that does it visually. Although I would add comics tell stories visually as well. So there is actually quite a lot of overlap between movies and comics. But again, movies are kind of a unique form. But again, this is kind of a weak definition because it doesn't really tell us much about how it works to do this. Here's a slightly better definition because it does that. It tells us how it works. So cinematography is the use of cameras and lighting to enhance emotion, develop conflict, and explore character. Why do I like this definition better? Well, it tells us a little bit more about what a cinematographer does. They use cameras and lighting. That is their kind of main area of emphasis. And again, this is really what photography is, right? Cameras and lighting. How cameras capture the way that light reflects off of surfaces, and then translate that into the images that we see on the screens. And but then it also adds this: the use of those things in order to enhance emotion, develop conflict, and explore character. Because that's really what stories are. Stories aren't just plots; they're also characters. The story wouldn't be a story without characters, and it wouldn't be a story without conflict, characters in conflict, and how they react to those conflicts. Stories are full of emotion, full of emotional depth, emotional complexity, maybe moral dilemmas. There's a whole kind of psychological element to stories, and what a good cinematographer does is they try to evoke some of those emotional and psychological elements through through the positioning of the camera, the movement of the camera, or through the use of lighting. And so what this unit it really tries to do is understand how they use that camera, how they use lighting in order to convey some of these things. Cinematographer actually goes by the name. The technical title for a cinematographer is the director of photography. So if you ever look at the credits of a film, that's how they will be listed: the director of photography. And they kind of oversee both the camera and the lighting crews on a film. They are kind of in charge of those crews because those are really the lighting is all about helping to enhance the image and create a certain kind of image. and the camera captures that image. Um, the cinematographer does work closely with the director and the editor, and the screenwriter as well. The director is kind of in charge of the entire operation, and really, the director will kind of determine the vision for the film, and it's the cinematographer's job most of the time to defer to that director and bring that director's vision to life visually. So if we look at the third bullet point here, the director might say, "Here's the look I'm going for. Here's the visual feel I want for this film," and the cinematographer has the expertise to know how to deliver that. Some directors will defer a lot to their cinematographer. Some directors won't even look through the viewfinder of a camera. They'll just trust their cinematographers to do that. Some are very involved. Alfred Hitchcock, for example, was highly involved. He was always looking through the viewfinder of the camera. So he had a lot of actually expertise in cinematography too. But again, the director and the cinematographer have to work very closely. In fact, some directors will work with the same cinematographer over and over again because they have a good relationship like that. Christopher Nolan, for instance, who made Inception and Interstellar and Dunkirk and the three Batman films, like the Dark Knight trilogy. For a long time, he worked with Wally Pfister, the cinematographer Wally Pfister. He worked with him for many, many films. And then in his two most recent films, he worked with another cinematographer, and you can kind of see the visual feel of his films kind of changed when he started working with a new cinematographer. This last point here is a good way to understand the general aim of cinematography, what cinematography is all about. A cinematographer will take a script. He starts with the script, and they will study that script. They'll study that story. They'll try to understand what the story is about, not just in terms of plot, but in terms of characterization, in terms of emotions, and so forth. And they'll try to figure out what the best way is to depict that tone visually. Okay, let's look at some examples of this. Here are some two fairly recent films: La La Land, kind of a modern musical, and Grand Budapest Hotel, a film by director Wes Anderson. Now, I would say if you study the cinematography of these films, you'll notice that these aren't entirely realistic movies. They don't look realistic. Okay, La La Land, like many musicals, isn't really realistic. I mean, people don't go around busting into song at random times. People on a freeway stuck in traffic don't start dancing on their cars, right? But they do in this movie. And you'll notice too that the cinematography also kind of feels unrealistic, right? Like here, this is a really beautiful shot. Our two main characters here are dancing, and it seems like they're just kind of floating in space, right? And they're kind of surrounded by what look like stars, and there's a kind of almost like dreamlike quality to this shot, and that's very purposeful. Because that dreamlike quality, that unrealistic, almost hopeful quality, is one of the elements of the story itself. And a lot of musicals are kind of dreamlike in a way. They're not realistic. Music tries to kind of take us to another plane, and so the cinematography helps to do that as well.